Now, probably the number one thing you can do to keep a project like this from getting out of hand is to keep the plumbing fixtures in about the same spot. As soon as you start to move the tub, the toilet, or the sink, you could run into major problems rerouting pipes. Now, you may have to rip up the subfloor to do the rerouting, or go into the room below and start tearing out the ceiling. Now, the only thing we're going to do is move the sink, which was in this spot, over about 3 feet. Well, that's not that big a deal.
And what we've done is taken off the old stub out for the galvanized drain line that used to be here. Then we ran this horizontal drain line across. Okay, that is going to be 15.
Okay, so that's 1 3/8, 16 3/8.
Yep. Now we can measure and cut the vertical piece for the vent here. Then we'll attach that to this male adapter to connect the PVC with this galvanized.
Now with PVC, you can cut this with a chop saw, or a hacksaw works out pretty well too. When you do get it cut, you should make sure you clean off any of the burrs before you make your connections.
To glue PVC, the first step is to use this cleaner on the two surfaces. Then we want to glue up both pieces with the cement. Okay, here we go. Okay. Put them together and give them a little twist and hold it.
Now we just want to take some Teflon tape and put that over the threads before we make our connection. Now we want to put this on clockwise so that when we screw our pipe into position, the Teflon tape doesn't come off. Yeah, that should do it pretty well, just like that. All right, now to make our connection at the top between the PVC and the galvanized, we use that threaded connector. Down here, we're going to be using a no-hub connector. It has this rubber sleeve slide up over the connection between the PVC and the galvanized, and then there's this double clamp that I'll tighten down over the top of that.
Well, we finished up the drain line, and now we're moving on to the supply lines. Now, the drain line was pretty simple. All we did was extend that, but there are limitations to exactly what you can do there. Now, we're working with 1.5" diameter pipe. That's 1.5" inside diameter. Now, working with that size pipe, the maximum that we can go is 42 inches from our vent.
The vent pipes are, of course, the ones that go up. And the reason that you need these is to allow the waste to flow down the drain without sucking the water out of the traps in the various fixtures.
Now, many times, what you'll have is a main soil stack, like the black one over here, that will serve as both the drain and the vent. And if you have any vents tying into that, they have to tie in at a point that's above the highest drain in the house. It gets a little complicated.
Yeah, so even with the simple modification to the drain line, we did check with a couple of people to make sure we're doing everything according to code.
Now, when it comes to the supply lines, this may look a little more complicated, but this is actually where you'll probably make fewer major mistakes. Now, what I'm doing is extending the hot and cold water lines, and here's just a matter of common sense of coming up with the right number of elbows to have those end up in just the spot you want inside the cabinet. I just have to cut this last piece of copper pipe. Now, this is 1/2" copper tubing type M, which is generally used for inside work. I'm using a tube cutter that I just gradually tighten down, spin around until it cuts it. Now I can clean off the tube. Use some emery cloths to do that and get the ends nice and clean. This gets any oxidation that might be on the pipes. For the inside of the fitting, I'll use a little wire brush to do that. Now, once they're cleaned, then we can flux the inside of the fitting as well as the tube. This flux is also sometimes called soldering paste. And once we have everything fluxed and clean, then what works best is to fit everything together. And once it's fit together, then we can sweat the joints. I want to just crimp this fitting ever so slightly to hold it in place. Okay, I'll put my last fitting on here, and we can fire up the torch. There we go. All right, let's see, what about here? Now when you're starting to heat your fittings, you want to make sure you're working with dry pipes. If there's any water in the pipes, it's going to make it pretty tough to get the fittings warm enough to where you can do your sweating. It takes a little time. Once you think the fitting might be warm enough, then you can give it a test. Now once it's hot enough, by holding the solder on the opposite side of the heat, it should draw that solder right into the fitting.
Oh, one other thing. We do still have the water on. Rather than shut it off for a long time, we'll just turn it off when we make the last few connections to the existing pipes. I'm just going to figure out the shower valve for tomorrow.
Okay. Well, this morning we're just about set to bring the tub up. Now, this is a cast iron tub, so we have a few people coming over to help lift it up there. Robin's just finishing up all the plumbing, so that's all set to go. I'm installing the drain overflow assembly. It's a lot easier to do it here than once it's installed up in the bathroom. Well, this is a drain tube. It hooks up to the drain, and the overflow assembly, get this gasket on here, has gaskets inside of this so I can slide this down into the drain tube when we make our connection. Okay, tighten that thing. And then we take the lift rod assembly, and that slides down the overflow tube, and this is where we'll operate the drain.